Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this evening's Policy and Oversight Board. This is the first meeting of the board in this municipal year. Before I go on to the formal meeting agenda, I have a few bits of housekeeping to do. Just to introduce myself, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Councillor Lisa Homan and I chair the Policy and Oversight Board. This meeting is being live streamed to the council's YouTube channel this evening. By participating, you are agreeing to being on that recording. Please could officers and guests as well, welcome this evening, introduce themselves before they address the committee so that we know which organisation, which department and your names. Thank you. If the fire alarms should sound, please leave the meeting in an orderly fashion by the staff exit, which is on the right behind me. Officers of the council will be here to direct you to the assembly point in Riverside Gardens, should that happen. There are also toilets available on the left-hand side, so I think that's all of the housekeeping issues we want to raise. So I would like to welcome Councillor Alfonso to the board, which is your first meeting. And I believe Councillor Antonades is running about 5 minutes late, so she will be with us very shortly. And I'd like to thank the previous two members who are no longer on the board. That's Councillor Nicholas Salou and Councillor Brocklebank Fowler for their contributions over the last 3 years to Policy and Oversight Board. So thank you to them. And on that note, have we got any apologies for absence? I think we might have one.
Just from Councillor Rowbottom.
Councillor Helen Rowbottom, and I think Councillor Antonades is on her way, and I believe that Councillor Harvey, Cabinet Member for Social Inclusion and Community Safety, is on her way as well, so she should be with us shortly, but she had a ward engagement, which is probably what's delayed her a little bit. So that's apologies. Declarations of interest. Has anybody got any
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
Yes, in relation to agenda item number 4, just to know that I'm a trustee of Hammersmith United Charities.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Any other declarations of interest from anybody? No? Okay, thank you very much. Could I ask you to look at the minutes of the previous meeting? Is everybody happy with the minutes of the previous meeting? And I believe that a number of actions that came out of the workforce monitoring report have been circulated. Have all the members of the board received those? No? It's
minutes.
It's attached to the minutes of the meeting, apparently. So you have had them, but yeah. So if there's any further actions out of those, then please let David know and we'll chase up. But there is quite a comprehensive response to a lot of the questions that were raised, I believe. Okay, thank you. So that leads us to the first report of the evening, which is Cost of Living Progress Report. And I think that Matt Sells is going to introduce this report, just for the benefit of the board members that have not been present before. I think this is probably the third time we've had a look at cost of living. Fourth time we've had a look at cost of living. It's obviously really important to the council to do whatever we can within the powers and the finances available. So it's important that we have an update and track the progress of what's been happening in the council. So over to you, Matt, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Councillor Homan, and welcome. Yeah, this is the fourth in a series of reports, so welcome your contributions today and looking forward to further contributions today. I've got a short presentation. It's only 3, 4, 5 slides, I think, just to set the scene here. Thank you, David. Okay, so fourth in the series, we've provided you with a progress report and a supporting appendix, which looks at the support we provided to residents local businesses and others over the last 3 financial years, so from 22-23 up to 24-25. We're also doing lots of activity in year. So Household Support Fund was extended to March 26. So there's a programme, a strategy in place also for this year. We'll welcome today with some guests, which you introduced earlier, Councillor Homan. One of the key parts of our strategy has been to deliver our support through an alliance of local partners, VCS and other partners. I'm very pleased to welcome Phil, Sarah and Louise to join us tonight. And they came actually to previous reports to this board on the item. Do you want to say hello now?
Hi, yeah, I'm Phil. I'm the CEO of Hammersmith and Fulham Food Bank.
Hi, I'm Sarah Lumger. I'm the Operations Manager of People Arise Now.
Hi, I'm Louise Wilson. I'm the Executive Director, CEO of Hammersmith and Fulham Giving.
Thank you. And from a programme coordination, Bashiba's with us, but also we're joined tonight by 2 of the scheme leads. So we thought it might be nice for you to hear, or you may want to hear directly from schemes within the current strategy. So Christine, Joseph, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, Christine, Fuel, Poverty and Energy Efficient Lead.
Hi, Joseph Pascual, Service Lead for Supporting Vulnerable Communities.
Thank you, David. Next slide. Okay, so since 22-23, we have invested around 9.55 million. That's included 8.5 million of successive rounds of household support funds from the current government and the previous government, as well as there's been £1 million of council investments and also some public health. Now, the council investment there has been dedicated to some cost of living schemes, but sits alongside the council's significant other policy commitments around welfare support, welfare infrastructure. And there's some further details in your report for this evening, but that amounts in year equivalent to around 50 million of council support around agendas such as free home care, free breakfast, council tax support scheme, and so on. So there's a very comprehensive, wider policy framework around this agenda that the council supports alongside cost of living. And then the strategy in terms of what we've done with the allocation of funding. I've mentioned the alliance. It's also been a priority around providing hardship immediate support to residents who need it. It's been about providing universal access to help and guidance for those that need it in the borough. And lastly, it's been about preventative support, us linking through this programme into wider, longer-term strategies of the council around addressing this agenda. Thank you, David. And just in terms of the outcomes, the guests here will be more able than I to talk about the alliance and their own work as important VCS local partners. But we've got a steering group, Louise, Sarah and Phil being representatives on that. They've helped share resource ideas, give us guidance and so on. And the alliance steering group has been a key driver of our community compass, which is a new signposting platform, which we're hoping to launch this autumn. And then I think finally, in terms of those broader outcomes from this funding and the support we've provided. So we've been able to target support to disadvantaged residents most impacted by the rise in everyday living costs, fuel, food and housing in particular. And you've got some of the groups there represented on the slide. We've had a wide impact, we feel, through the work. So, for example, in the last financial year, we did 76,000 awards of help through the programme, and there were 69,000 in the previous year. So there's wide, extensive reach from the activities we've done. It's extended the council's compassionate offer. I mentioned those wider policy framework a moment ago, and we've taken a balanced approach. So we had a DWP monitoring visit last financial year, and they recognised the compassionate approach that we've taken and the balance in our approach. And compassion is obviously one of the key values of the council. And I'm trying to, have I missed anything? No, that will do. I think that's it. And welcome open to the board for comments and questions. Thank you.
Okay, does anybody want to ask Matt anything before we maybe ask our voluntary sector partners to say something about their involvement? I know certainly people have been here before, so it's really good to hear from our partners how things are moving on. Does anybody want to ask Matt anything for the moment? Councillor Daly, yeah.
Thanks very much, Matt. Thank you so much for this report. It's really comprehensive. It's really, really useful. Thank you. I couldn't get a sense, or I didn't get a sense of just what sort of percentage of residents have had some help in one form or another. That figure that you just put up was 76,000. Is that 76,000 households, or is that 76,000 offers of help or moments of help? And do you have any idea of just what sort of percentage have benefited?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's very hard for us. So it's 76,000 awards of help. It doesn't necessarily mean 76,000 residents. So what we haven't got, so we've had a program at different times of up to 25 different schemes. We've had the great contribution of external partners managing schemes on our behalf. Currently within year, we've got about 15 schemes. We've targeted them a little more. We don't have a single data system that sits across all of those different schemes at different periods for us to be able to boil down and say, this is the specific number of people we've helped. What I can say, for example, is the cost of living advice team, which has been in place since around October 22, I think, has had 43,000 calls up to March of this year. I think that's right. And that has helped 10,000 residents. Okay, but we've also had additional support. So I think we can be confident that the program has helped more than 10,000 local residents, but we just don't have that single data system to be able to add everything up together. And we've had individual schemes that have reached thousands of residents, such as Winter Support Fund, I think was 6,500, Louise, from recollection.
Yeah, it was around it was around just under 6,000, and I think that was saying it was around 3% of individuals and 4% of households were reached within that range, but generally of those that were in need of support.
Thank you. My assumption is that because the funding for the kind of the additional funding came in fits and starts, and last time you were here, you were talking about how it kind of got down to the knuckle of whether we were going to get it or not, whether the then government was going to roll it on for another 6 months. So there wasn't much investment in the administration behind it, which has made really analysing it and scrutinising where that's gone more difficult. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. So since there's been, I'm just trying to remember, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 HSF grants over the period, these 3 years. 4 of them have been 6 months. So you can imagine the report talks about how we have launched new things. We've got Healthy Homes is a new scheme. We've done warm welcomes. We've done some specific innovative things across this period. But having such short time periods of grants has made it very difficult for us to long-term plan. So we very much welcome the current government's decisions to extend the HSF, and they did it for full 12 months. That's given us more certainty in year, and the report talks about the current government's plans around the Crisis Resilience Fund. So all of the sector have been calling for longer term funding around crisis support. The current government has responded to that through that fund, and that will be a 3-year, I think it is, multi-year replacement to household support fund. So rather than it being 6 months, we've got something for 3 years, and the council will need to decide how that's best utilised. But yeah, I hope that goes some way towards answering your question.
It does. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Perez.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much for that report, and thank you to the Alliance for the work that they're doing at the moment and addressing needs that our residents have. So the report mentions a DWP monitoring visit. Can you please tell us a little bit more about that process and what did it entail? Thank you.
Yeah, it was a routine visit. So DWP is the funder of household support funds. So from time to time, they go out and speak to different local authorities. So we had a visit in 2024. Joseph's area was part of that, Bathsheba, and we just presented back to them what our strategy was. It was a monitoring visit where they looked at sort of the administration of the grants, how we go about things, how we ensure provide assurance on how the funding's been used and so on. And we presented to the DWP officer some highlights on some of our key schemes. So they heard directly from 3 of the leads for our schemes of support. And they provided a feedback report at the end of that. That was very positive. And as I put in the report and in the presentation, they referred to the fact that we had taken a very balanced approach, balanced in terms of reaching a wide range of disadvantaged residents, and they welcomed what we were doing locally.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Yes, I know the quote that you have in the report from the DWP visit. Were there any recommendations as part of this process?
No, there wasn't actually. It was particularly around it was a kind of a quality check around the administration. No, there were no specific recommendations. I mean, there's been a wider evaluation that DWP's commissioned of Household Support Fund nationally. So that was an evaluation that reported just earlier this year on HSF4. And so we're in round 7. Sorry, I'm trying to pad because I'm trying to remember when 4 related to. Well, that must have been 23, 24. So there's been a national evaluation of Household Support Fund. So we've been recently looking at the results of that. Is there anything for us to learn from that? So, for example, Councillor Daly, that spoke a bit about data systems and some of the difficulties of, to answer questions like you had because of lack of data systems. But one of the recommendations from the national evaluation, for example, was around increasing emphasis on prevention and increasing emphasis on financial inclusion. And that is one thing that the administration you had in your manifesto actually in 22, and it's something we're now looking at developing through a financial inclusion strategy. So we're trying to take learning from things like the national evaluation and apply it locally as well.
Councillor Antoniades.
Hello, thank you very much. Just a quick question. I do see that you have one of your measures is for healthier homes, because we all know that leads to healthy lifestyles and healthy ways of being. So what, can you tell me how much of that has been taken up and how you by residents, and what has been done so far, and what future projections you may have for that?
Yeah, we're very lucky this evening to be joined by the lead for our Healthy Homes scheme. So I'll hand over to Christine.
Okay, thank you. So it's broken up into a few services. So the first part is they go into people's homes to install simple energy efficient measures. And then there's also the grant support where they help residents apply for larger retrofits like insulation or heat pumps. That's really where you save a lot more energy and money. And through these different sections, I would break it up depending on the savings through there. So far, there's been about 146 residents or households that have taken up on the simple energy efficient measures / phone consultations.
Sorry, how many did you say?
146.
Okay.
And then about 22 have taken up on the retrofit grants. So the 22 that have taken up on the grants, that's just applied for the grant. They're still going through the installations. So we hope that the 22 will end up being installed. But we've recently got more funding for this grant. This started October last year. And for year 2 of this scheme, starting November this year, we've received 95,000 to upscale until April next year. So during this phase, we will upscale the KPIs to much more. So the original contract is about 100 households being supported, but this over the next year will be over 300.
Great. It's not working very well here. Yeah, so we've recently had Imperial come in and talk to us about clean air in the Climate and Ecology Pack, and we know that air is just as unsafe in the home than out of the home. So as part of this, maybe it's more of a broader question really, are we looking at giving grants for changing from gas cookers to induction? And that
yeah.
would really, I think, help a lot with the air quality inside the home.
100%. That's a really good question. At the moment, we're not doing anything, but we are definitely thinking about this.
Okay.
And it's not that we definitely do provide advice to households to move away from gas, but we don't have any grants or any support at the moment to allow people to change over to induction.
Because actually, it is a fairly quick fix, that one. It's not too expensive to switch over to these. The induction hobs are coming down in price, and if there's also money towards it, it could be quite one of the more lucrative measures, I think. Okay, well, hopefully we'll get cracking on that.
Yeah, we'll definitely consider it.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Alfonso.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, and thank you very much for your very extensive report. It was a very good read. Has any analysis been done on how many extra awards had to be made this year due to the government's cruel winter fuel payment cut that has now been U-turned on?
In the last 6 months, we did a specific scheme that assisted low-income pensioners that had lost entitlement to the winter fuel allowance. So that supported the back end of the last financial year around 850 low-income pensioners, which is a great, providing them with a voucher to provide assistance with essential living costs. So that is a scheme that we looked at last year. In year, we're considering whether to do that or something else. I mean, the report refers to welcoming the current government's shift around the winter fuel allowance. I think nationally that will lead to 75% of low-income or pensioners receiving it going forward, which is welcome, and that will bring benefits further benefits to low-income pensioners. But yeah, we helped around 850, I think it was, pensioners in the last 6 months.
Thank you.
I think maybe our cabinet members might want to come back on that in a minute. But Councillor Vaughan.
Thank you, Chair. So, I mean, I've probably got questions that are in a similar area to some of my colleagues, but I'm interested in what measurement you've got. I think you've been talking about these national studies of an evaluation of how the household support fund has been spent and the impact that it has, but have we got any local or are there plans for any local measurement of the impact? Particularly, I can't remember whether any of these involve getting people into work. I think when we've discussed this before, there are issues around getting people into work. And to what extent, I think what we've been talking about are these sort of more crisis funds, and to what extent are people repeatedly coming back in crisis, or does the intervention that we sort of take as part of this cost of living work? I noticed some very good testimonials, for example, which gave a good sense of what that was. Are there sort of people coming back for different areas of this, or are they sort of coming in once, getting some support, and then that has sort of put them on the right track? Or is there a sort of repeated cycle here where, you know, sort of some longer term or greater intervention and advice would be helpful?
A few questions there. On the impact report, part of the first part of your question, and I'll come back to the second. I'm looking down the table at Louise. So Louise has led something, the Winter Support Fund, and maybe she can introduce that. And as part of that, we've done impact reports. Sorry to put you on the spot there, Louise. Is that okay?
Hi, so it's Louise again from Hammersmith and Fulham Giving. So we've partnered, well, for some time H&F Giving has partnered with the council on delivering the household support funds. I personally have been in post for 2 years and worked with Matt and Bathsheba on the team there, and over the last couple of years we've delivered 2 years worth of funding. The first one delivered £340,000 worth of funding to around 35 organisations, reaching 10,000 individuals, and last year we delivered just over, I think, 213,000 to 28 organisations, reaching just under 6,000 individuals, and as I mentioned, 4% of households in the borough. We, as part of our work on delivering to on administering the fund, there's a couple of things that are probably worth highlighting. One is that the decision on where that funding goes in the borough is made by a panel of community representatives. So we've got people that know the borough. We also had a representative from the council on there that are really objectively looking at the whole range of things that people are asking for and trying to sort of direct that money to where it's needed most. We then, as part of the monitoring, will be visiting organisations, having calls. We have reports at the end that will bring in the data, and then we pull all of that data together, which is backed up by really good sort of case studies and stories and things like that that really bring to life the impact of the report. So we have at the back end of that the data that will be showing, you know, sort of roughly, I guess, talking about what you're interested in at the moment, just over 20% of that support this year went to pensioners, and there was the definite push at trying to get sort of more people and community organisations to support pensioners whether they could, knowing what was happening with the winter fuel allowance on that side. But really, when we're sort of matching up what we're hearing, what the great work of the organisations like People Arise Now and the Food Bank are doing as well, is that it is the support is great. It really helps them back the programs. They've got the great relationships that they have with the individuals that are coming in. Lots of these organisations do, and the kind of support we provide in that emergency relief is able to really help them sort of back up what they're doing and do that really well. Naturally, there's calls for, can it be longer term? There's other times of the year that it's needed, all of this side of things, but I think it's always very well received at that time of year. But if anyone's interested more in seeing the data or looking at any of the details, we have that at the back end. We use that, and we use everything that we hear to learn from, to input into the development of future rounds, and to make sure that the limited funding and the funding we've got, we can maximise its effectiveness in the borough, because we know there's so much support that is needed. And I think possibly on coming back on the question about repeat funding and like whether people are coming up, I think that does depend. Again, it might be that our colleagues here have to have some sort of interesting thing in that, but the report that we've recently published into Local Need and Hammersmith Fulham is saying that there's lots of what we're hearing from people we're talking about is, as well as people that might just need something as a one-off or be coming back again, there's people that have never needed support before. So you've got a rising in work poverty, which means that actually you've got more people that are working that are struggling to make ends meet. And I think that is something that we're seeing happen. And what's great with programs like this is we're able to sort of respond where we can with that funding to help it. But sadly, I think it's not always going to be about one injection sorting everything out at the moment, because I think across the board, people are facing challenges, and some people that have never faced challenges before.
Sorry.
Thanks. Sorry. Whilst it's on my mind, coming back to Councillor Antonadi's question earlier on, are there any sort of key interventions that we might be able to make on a sort of preventative side, such as the example of suggesting that people move towards induction rather than gas, for example, that are things that we've identified as initiatives that we could push in the sort of wider sphere of, well, if not as part of all of this, in a sort of wider, perhaps, climate change and ecology programme?
Yeah, I think there are. So on the specific induction point, I just wonder whether we could take it away, because the council obviously invests significant money in council homes, and it could be that is leading to removal of gas and replacement with induction. So I don't know if we can look into that. That might be one area where it's already happening. I think there are a number of areas. I said part of the strategy was linking to prevention and longer term strategies that the council's got in place through the resources of cost of living. And as part of those things, there's a number of work streams and activities planned. So we've already heard from Christine around healthy homes. That's the new one-stop shop for fuel poverty. And there's a number of things happening there, and trying to get residents to access grants and shift behaviour and so on. We're also supporting the Food Action Plan that Cabinet recently approved, and that's got a series of planned activities. The programme's helped support, there's been a food coordinator for the Food for All partnership, and Phil, I think you chair that, or you're on that, co-chair that. So there's been a number of things that we've been supporting there, and we're planning to do further things and work, again, through that action plan. And in terms of mentioned, there's plans to do financial inclusion strategy and look at debt, arrears and those kind of things and how that can help residents. And Joseph, finally, beside me around the prevention on homelessness prevention. I didn't know if you wanted to hear from Joseph around how that is helping to sort of prevent people going into becoming homeless.
Hi, thank you. Yes, the Household Support Fund, which we've been entitled to, or we've been privileged to administer, has been helping literally more than 2,000 households, or so more than 1,700 households with 2,100 awards in order to prevent them from becoming homeless again. Across the different sectors of tenancies, whether it's private rented sector, temporary accommodation, or housing association or council tenancies, we have a software that uses or employs an algorithm that detects any breaches or like break-in patterns, in that at the first scent of like falling into rent arrears, we go in there and intervene and find out what sort of help we can employ, digging deeper into the available stuff that we've got from the different databases that we have, and try and prevent them from becoming homeless. We also help care leavers or care assisted people to move into the new accommodation with the help of a startup furniture in order to help them with their new rent liability or rental obligation. And we've realized that it's very helpful actually to help people at the beginning before a crisis happens. We intervene because homelessness is very costly. It's much more efficient to prevent people from becoming homeless than it is to relieve the homelessness, because of the housing market, and it's very difficult and very expensive to procure accommodation. So in that way, we found that utilizing the Household Support Fund through this cost of living initiative, we're able to address those that are not covered by mainstream benefits, because let's face it, it's not enough. There's a market there. There's a set of people who simply won't be assisted by mainstream benefits, and that is what we target, and that really helps along the way. Thank you.
Councillor Treyi.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you for this. The report was really interesting. And what I wanted to say thank you is for the plethora of measures that you're bringing in, supporting so many residents, particularly to mitigate the pain of the cost of living crisis that, let's face it, was brought on by the horrific Conservative Liz Truss economy budget of 2022 that we have been suffering from ever since. So thank you very much for all you're doing.
Thank you for that. Can I just come back before we invite the guests to sort of say about what they've been doing and how they've been finding working with us? Can I just come back on a couple of points? One was about the retrofitting. I'm quite intrigued about this because I would have thought that there was a limited type of properties suitable for us to be able to award funding for retrofitting, sort of under a sort of cost of living kind of criteria, if you like. So I'd be quite interested in you saying a little bit more about that. The other thought that occurs to me is we're talking about the winter fuel allowance a lot, but the headlines now is about how much it might cost to actually cool your home down because of issues with, you know, particularly recently with hot weather and people using fans. So they're actually using a lot more electricity. And I just wondered if we've seen any issues with electricity bills because of that, because I think that might be something that we would want to think about for the future. So just throwing that out there really as a comment. I don't know if anybody's got any thoughts on that.
Should I respond to the retrofitting? So we have a couple of grants with different types of criteria. So we have a couple of grants eco and warm homes local grant and warm homes social housing, which is targeted to those who are low income and vulnerable. So the local grant and the eco is targeted to those with a household income of 36K and below, with a health condition, etc., and those who classify as fuel poor, in addition to their home being an EPC D or below. There's two other grants that doesn't have an income limit. Excuse me, the Great British Insulation Scheme, which you just have to have a home that's EPC D or below, and then the Boiler Upgrade Scheme, which doesn't have an income limit or a EPC limit. So these two are catered to what we call the able to pay market, which aren't defined as fuel poor.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey, did you want to make a contribution now?
Yeah, I probably would like to make several contributions actually, but just for now, I feel before we move on to bring more guests in, I just firstly apologise for being late, so I'm very sorry about that. I was at a residents' meeting. But we're not here to make cheap digs. We're really not. We've got members of our community here, we've got officers here who've worked incredibly hard, working hard to deliver for our residents and working with our residents and achieving so much in such a short time with really restricted resources, actually. So we're not here to make cheap digs. And if we wanted to talk about cruel policies, I could spend a month sitting here talking about the last 14 years and all the benefit cuts and all the impact on children and child poverty. And don't let me forget to say pensioners, because the last government got rid of certain rules that meant that pensioners with savings were penalised. So I could talk forever about that stuff. So we're not here to make cheap digs and do this sort of nonsense. We're here to have a serious conversation about the help that our communities are supporting our residents with. And saying that, you know, our policies and the way we've developed the programme has been about prevention, it's been about putting in place measures such as fuel vouchers. So whether it's summer or winter, if someone's bills are going up, they can ask for vouchers to help with that cost. We've got a hardship fund that virtually anyone in the borough could almost claim, because it is, the criteria is so open, it's to recognise that we're at times of hardship where people need help. So we know, because of trust, some people's mortgages have gone up by over £1,000. So, you know, we've put things in place to do what we can to help as many residents as possible. In addition to that, with the fuel work that we're doing, people can get insulation for their homes to put by the windows so that the heat doesn't escape, and that helps keep the bills down. Our council tax support is in place for people. We are helping people who are at risk of eviction for homelessness due to rent arrears and helping to keep them in their homes, which benefits everyone longer term. And we're, as Joseph said, you know, we're doing work with care leavers, we're doing work with children and families. This is a huge, massive piece of work right across the whole council, right across the whole borough. We have over 70 organisations that come to our Cost of Living Alliance meetings every so many months in the year. And we've got an amazing group of people that come to our steering group who are contributing all the time to our policies and making real change and a difference. So let's not bring this down to cheap digs. Let's just focus on the fact that we're doing some amazing work here and look at how else we can improve.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. And on that note, the partnership, welcome this evening. I know I've been to at least one of those meetings very early on, probably a couple of them. And I think it's incredible that we have sort of managed to pull together lots of things that we do across the council, but also worked with our partners in the third sector to bring the services that you provide and bring it all together into this sort of one pot of cost of living, if you like, which seems to be having real impact. And so for those future funding rounds, if we do have to bid for grants and what have you, we seem to be very in a good place and we seem to be quite fit and ready to do that. But maybe you could talk to us a little bit. I don't know who wants to start. Phil, I'm looking at you because I'm directly opposite you. Maybe you'd like to start a little bit and just say how things have developed since we last saw you at this committee.
Yeah, sure. And maybe a bit of background just for those of you who don't know the food bank and kind of the history. Obviously, the cost of living crisis, we saw numbers double come into food bank from about 1,000 a month to 2,000 a month. The winter after, 2023, we saw it go up by another 500. So we're feeding about 2,500 a month. This winter, we didn't see things go up at all. We've stayed stable at 2,500. And I think that's not just because of one thing, that's because of a huge amount of work being done within the food bank and across the whole sector. And obviously this type of investment in that support is really important. For me personally, the next step in this borough is then moving to more prevention. And I really welcome the mentions about H&F Community Compass, something that's really close to my heart, and we've driven forward and really is a foundation for this borough to connect agencies together and to build a platform that's built for residents, not for agencies, so that neighbours can help neighbours, that people can get the support that they need quickly and easily. But again, we see that as kind of the bedrock, the foundations that are needed for the borough to then take forward how can we drive early intervention in Hammersmith and Fulham so people can get help before they reach crisis. And that then obviously would lead to a reduction in food bank numbers, and that's what we kind of dream of, you know, putting ourselves out of work. What I would say is all of this investment doesn't just create, it isn't just the money that goes in directly from council. It's enabled us to lever other projects, you know, that kind of has brought extra money and extra resources into the community. It's a really exciting project called Tackling Destitution Together. That's funded by Citizens Advice nationally and Trussell Trust in partnership. And we've managed to secure one of only 5 projects in the UK. So the only one kind of Midlands or South. And it was all because of our vision for the borough, the fact we were building Community Compass, we were bringing agencies together, and we had that kind of platform to take it a step further. That project will be all about training frontline workers and volunteers on how to have good conversations, how to have the confidence to ask the right questions at an early stage, and use Community Compass to connect people with the support so they get help before they fall into crisis. And that's a really exciting development and kind of, you know, obviously not part of this report, but this report has enabled that type of project to happen.
Thank you, Phil. Sarah or Louise, would you like to say how your involvement has been?
Yeah, I'll go next. Again, Sarah from People Arise Now, and I'm not sure how many people know about our work, but we're for safe and thriving communities. Started off helping with family members of offenders, especially mothers who didn't have support, felt the stigma of the crime, and just had no one to turn to. That's where we started, and we quickly started working with offenders through the gate. And we moved on to a lot of preventative work. So working with families, dealing with the causes of crime, helping families, which of course helps, is involved with cost of living, and working with young people. And we've just now started to work with the Duke of Edinburgh Award. So we offer that now as well for young people, just to offer opportunities and make sure that people can thrive as best as they can, no matter how they start and their circumstances. So it's been a real privilege to be on the cost of living steering committee and being part of the Alliance and seeing all the work that we've been able to achieve. Really thankful to Bathsheba and Matt and my colleagues here, and I echo everything that's been said on our side. One thing that I really found quite impactful being on the Alliance was one of the offshoots of our work. And it started off with having conversations with families in White City and just their frustration with some of the businesses that had moved into White City, and they felt like they hadn't got the benefits despite all the promises. And there was a lot of work that was done through the council. They really, really listened. And there's been work in amending, and I think the corporate social responsibility and how we can work better with businesses. I know that's still in progress, but it really felt like the council was listening and made positive, concrete steps to better the relationships between residents and businesses. That was something that was started in the Cost of Living Alliance. And it was something that we were able to take back to residents and say, look, the council is really doing work. They are listening, and it's not going to be immediate, but this is long-term steps to dealing with the cost of living crisis, ensuring that people have jobs, ensuring that students can have, good quality work experiences. So I'm really grateful for that work. And I know that the people that we work with are very grateful for that too.
Great, thank you. Louise, you've already given us lots of interesting figures. Have you got anything you'd like to add to that?
I feel like I've covered off quite a lot of the important stuff we did as part of, particularly as part of the cost of living work. But just, I guess, a couple of things just to highlight from our side is I'm not sure who's aware of what we do here, but we are basically, H&F Giving itself is a place-based giving organisation. So we're part of a network called London's Giving, and there's the equivalent of us in lots of London boroughs. And we have a role in really sort of connecting the community to make sure that we are ensuring that resource and support goes to those that need it most, but we also have a role in unlocking that support. So we have a role in trying to unlock new funding, new support, new resources in the borough to bring that to people, to make sure that we're able to sort of invest more. People may know probably next door neighbour, like Henson and Chelsea Foundation is our equivalent. So that's kind of sort of where we're on a journey to aspiring to be, I guess, in a few years' time. But it's, I think, really important for us to play sort of knowing almost that dual role. We also know the challenges as we're out there fundraising and doing stuff ourselves that so many of the community organisations are facing. And I think one of the things we're always hearing is about how, you know, like longer term support, that sort of surety of being able to say this is for a longer period, is really good, and what we're trying to strive for all round. And I think just shouting out to Matt and Bathsheba and the team for what they've done when they've been given, you've got sort of really short amounts of funding, they've tried really hard to use that in that time. And I think even the difference of having a year now is good, and the thought of whether there's a 3-year programme that will go into place, I'm sure that everything that's been achieved can be achieved so much better by having that sort of longer term vision. And it's also what the community organisations, I think, need, because having to do more applications every 6 months and things like this, it's hard, it's tough, it's resource that could be spent elsewhere. And that's where we're trying to sort of really work and shift to seeing what sustainable support we can unlock for people. And we are launching a new campaign that will be looking for a better Hammersmith and Fulham, that's backed off our recent report. And we encourage everyone sort of take a look, get behind it, share it in your with your constituents, because I think the more that we can unlock here and the more we can support as a whole is going to help all this great work be backed up across the board as well.
Great, thank you. And that report and any other reports or whatever you've got, please make sure that councillors get to see them, because they might only glance at them or they might read them in depth, but you know, it's always really useful information when we're out and about and advocating. So if you could, that'd be great. Any questions to our guests? Councillor Daly.
Thank you very much, Chair. Phil. Both you and Joseph have spoken about preventing crisis. And I think we all here welcome the focus on crisis prevention. It's trying to stop that cascade of need that sort of starts with maybe a dentist bill and just keeps folding out through can't afford groceries to increasing debt and ultimately breakup of relationships, homelessness, the whole thing. We can watch that. So the food bank is one of the first stops really for residents on that road to crisis. Can you tell me or tell us how many of your clients are needing help on rare occasions rather than those that are needing help week in, week out to afford the essentials, please?
Yeah, so good question. So we're about 66, so we're a referral basis, is worth saying first of all. So we know that everyone who finds their way to food bank has already engaged with another agency, and we work with kind of over 100 different agencies who refer to us across all different sectors, and working on the basis that they know the people they're working with, and so they've got some background, there's already a relationship there. So about 66% of people who use food bank only need 1 to 3 vouchers. So we're still primarily 2/3 a kind of a crisis intervention service, a short term, keep the food on the table. Obviously, everyone who comes to us the first time, they get put in front of Citizen Advice. We have them in every session. So they get a proper assessment and proper advice to find out what the root cause of the problem is. And that's what drives us. That's what our passion is. How do we find the root cause of the problem? How do we fix it so they don't need to come back to us? So 2/3 of the people who use food bank kind of short term, 1 to 3 vouchers, 1 to 3 weeks, getting the advice and they're back on their feet again. For that third, that will be anything from kind of 4 vouchers all the way through to using us every week. And so what we've done, we get funded through 3SIF for the hub on White City Estate. And that's where we can do the wraparound support. outside of food bank sessions that are obviously busy and quite intense. And that's where we have funding through a family trust for a client support coordinator and a team of volunteers who do that kind of in-depth assessment and hand-holding model. And it's something that we really believe in and we really feel is like we've lost from society is the work that social workers or caseworkers used to do 15 years ago. But everyone is now under so much pressure that there's so much more of a quicker turnover for residents. Somebody to just spend the time and make a relationship. And like when I say hand-holding, I mean literally hand-holding. So your analogy of the dentist is actually really true. I was sitting listening to somebody the other day who was having their assessment, and that was the root cause of the problem was that he was in pain, and that's why he would never engage in other services. He would flit in and out. And like literally Gabby said, well, do you want me to find you a dentist? And he was gobsmacked that somebody would do that for him. And she literally she took him there, to the appointment, because if that's what the problem is, then we have to step into that space and find that solution, because there really does seem to be a lack of that level of engagement in our society nowadays. So we really believe in that model of like the short-term crisis, keep the food on the table, get the advice, find the solution. But for those who've got longer-term problems, they're often multi-issue, really complex. You have to spend the time and trust in order to then handhold people. Councillor Vaughan, you were talking about getting people back to work, and we've had some amazing successes, but it's usually been a number of footsteps before that people are ready for that. And then when they're ready, we can engage them in the employment services and we can have amazing results, life-changing results. But it's actually those steps along the way early on that kind of resolve those multi-issue and handhold people through those crises. Sorry, that was a long answer to a short question.
It was a great answer, thank you. Can I ask a follow-up question? Thanks. Thanks, Phil. I mean, it's such important work that you're doing, so thank you for kind of outlining all of that. In the report, there are a couple of examples of kind of cash-first initiatives that have been adopted here, and I think the awards are all sort of £250 to £500. So I would just be really interested to know what sort of level of support would kind of help people in that situation coming to the food bank. What would keep them away from the food bank, if you like? What would keep them away from that crisis?
Yeah, and obviously we've made massive use of that grant program and exactly those examples I'm talking about, the hand-holding, the complex issues. Some of those grants have helped to give people a fresh start and wipe off, whether it's utility debts or whatever it might be, and kind of get them a fresh start. I mean, on the other end, you could look at like a £30 to £50 food bank voucher, supermarket voucher, would then provide, the cost of a food bank parcel is about £30 in total for like 10 meals and plus toiletries. So yeah, you could look at it two different ways. A small amount could keep people fed and get them through that kind of 2 to 3 week crisis, or a large amount is for the more complex issues, if you like.
And would that be a kind of a recommendation that we could sort of take to look into that? Would that be a useful thing for this committee to do?
I mean, it would certainly, obviously, in terms of numbers, small amounts for those people who are those 2/3 who are using food bank 1 to 3 times of that supermarket voucher could stop them needing food bank at all. And especially if we could get that early intervention in place in the borough, it would be an interesting thing to look at.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Perez. Thank you very much. Thank you all for the presentation. So I just want to understand a little bit more about how the referrals work. So for example, Sarah, one of your beneficiaries, comes to People Arise now and they're telling you that they're struggling to eat or feed their family. Do you make a same-day referral? Is there an online case management system that supports that process? And also, what happens to people that may not know about the Alliance and may not have access to that initial service that then makes the referral? Thank you.
I should say a lot of our work, in fact, most of our work is advocacy work for people who really struggle to engage with normal channels. It could be through language or cultural reasons. And so most of our referrals we're actually getting are from social prescribers. The NHS doctors are referring beneficiaries to us, as well as often family members that we've engaged with. We do get people walking off the street, but it's mainly social subscribers and the NHS who are referring. So what we do our initial consultation, and as Phil has said, the hand-holding is so important. Just spending the time to really understand their issues. And often they'll tell you one issue, and as you start to deal with that, you uncover multiple issues. We all know that these issues are complex. And it really is the hand-holding, taking the time to be with them on the phone, staying on hold until the thing is answered, following up the next week, the casework, basically. It's really, really important because without it, people get stuck, they don't know what to do. I mean, there's specific things I can probably talk about later, but in terms of referrals, that's what we do. And then if there's a need for food bank, we refer to food bank, or we refer to step change if there's debt issues and other things. So we do have the relationships, but the whole purpose of community, HNF Community Compass, is to make those relationships and referrals easier, to understand what services are there and how the referral process, and not just do it online, but to develop relationships. So we're close to borough, and we really understand what each other are doing, how we can help each other. So that's what we're doing at the moment.
Thank you very much for that detailed example. And it's good to see how the members of the Alliance work and that referral process. And is there also access to mental health support? I mean, you may be approached by a member of the public or a beneficiary that may need practical support in terms of access to food, access to money and debt advice, access to housing. But if they also maybe have a crisis in relation to their mental health, is there access as well within the Alliance to that support?
I think there would be. So SOBUS run the Mental Health Equity Group, which I think happens monthly on a Thursday. And so there is that option to meet with, I think there's medical professionals in that alliance. So we can always tap into that and refer that way. It really depends on the level of mental health. And sometimes, depending on the circumstances, it could be there's a disrepair issue that is just driving the family crazy, and you can't try and sort that out, and that kind of lessens people's mental health issues. So it's, again, really understanding the circumstances, trying to understand the levels, our own capabilities and what resources are out there, and going from there.
Can I just come back on that point in particular, actually? We heard about the dentist, the person with the dentist, but health generally, are there health agencies engaged with the Cost of Living Alliance? And is that something that we might look at strengthening, is my question.
Health agencies in the broader...
Generally, because we just heard that you get referrals from health, but sometimes it may well be that you need to refer back to health. So it's kind of how that works across the Alliance. I see Matt Sells may have a comment on that.
Yeah, the Alliance includes representatives from NHS. We've had them at the steering group, Health Watch and others. So yes, there are NHS. I'm sure there's always things that we could do to strengthen, but there are already existing infrastructure and links in place.
Okay, that's my question. Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, just to add to that, really, our cost of living booklet has some specific pages around health-related issues, so that people, if they get that booklet, can see it. It's also on the website as well. So, and just to mention, in terms of mental health, if somebody types in particular things on the council website, Public Health has set it up so it directs them to get support from the listening place and other places like that. So we have got targeted support in the borough to help residents with mental health.
Great, thank you. Are there any other comments, suggestions? Councillor Harvey, is there anything you want to say in way of sort of coming to an end of this report?
Yeah, I suppose I would just like to touch on it. It was really great to hear from everyone and to hear people's experiences. The Alliance has been a really valuable vehicle to bring change, and we've done a huge amount of work. I'm not sure we've even touched on half of it here really, but there's been a lot of work, and partners have come to those alliance meetings, contributed their ideas, and then we've taken those ideas and gone on to deliver them. The cash first was one of those things that came up at one of our first alliance meetings, and we've been committed to delivering that. More recently, we were looking at training, and partners in the alliance were saying that they would like training because then they can help residents better if they get training. Simple things like, you know, what is financial inclusion, and how can you help people with that, or media training, or help with funding. So as a council, we've been looking at how we can bring our different services together to pull a training plan that we can then go out to partners to access. And we're also going out to partners to see what they can do to contribute to that plan. I don't know if we've mentioned the Macbeth Centre and Crosslight, but both of those have been delivering training courses around money advice and budgeting. And that's been really valuable for residents. We've got our advice team, the cost of living advice team, who take thousands of calls every year. And the booklet, we have over 10,000 booklets printed and delivered across the borough, which colleagues in the council use to help residents when they engage with them. They're able to direct people to it, as well as putting them in our libraries, our schools, our GP surgeries. So it has a wide range of people accessing them. We've had our warm welcomes, our pop-up advice, community compass we talked about, which was a real piece of partnership working to try and get it to a place that we want to build it so that residents can use it, and that's been really wonderful. Matt and Bathsheba have had to do some very difficult tasks under a lot of pressure, and maybe a bit of nagging from me every now and then. But it's been really great to work with them. And just kind of like sort of stepping back at what the council's been doing, in addition to the Household Support Fund, we put in £1 million of our own money. In addition to that, every year we're funding advice, around £1 million towards advice every single year. In addition to that, we're funding just under 3 million to our third sector through our Free SIF grants programme. So we are doing a lot of work, and we see that money benefits our communities, our community groups and organisations. They're able to go out and get funding as well, which brings them more money into the borough, which helps our residents. And sort of moving forward, we're looking at some more unique projects about how we can do particular things in areas where there's a huge amount of poverty in the north of the borough as well. And take on board the point about the food voucher. I guess referring people to the food bank quite quickly is probably a quicker option than trying to get a food voucher out to someone in the post. But we can take that way and look at it, and there's always room for improvement. So just to say thank you so much to everybody in the team, Chrissy, Joseph, Bash, Shiva, Matt, all of the cost of living team and everyone else, benefits as well, for all the brilliant work they're doing, and all our wonderful partners who we couldn't do it without you. So thank you so much. And to all those that might be watching or aren't here tonight that have contributed. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. I think in your initial introduction, Matt, you mentioned that a lot of this links into various strategies that we've got running across the council, and I think you mentioned the food strategy and a couple of others. Strategies which may well be worth looking at in themselves in the various packs, and also here. So we will be looking at the cost of living elements in those strategies, because I think it's great, the Alliance, but we are doing a lot of things across the country, the council, which link into a lot of things. We can talk about climate change and housing, as you've spoken about already tonight. It's not just in isolation. And I think that is the point about this Alliance, how it has grown from kind of lots of potentially quite isolated good things that were happening in the borough and within the council itself, and how it's managed to pull it all together so that collectively we are delivering a lot more than what we would have done as individual services or an individual council. So thank you for the report. I think we've taken on board that there may be a few more preventative actions that could be developed going forward. So should we come back to this at some point in the future, which we will, to monitor how things are going, perhaps we'll have a few more new ideas like food vouchers in the post or whatever coming to the committee. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for your time this evening, for coming and updating us. It's much appreciated. And we'll just take a 2-minute break while we change officers for the next
Thank you.
report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll go for a wee.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. We're now going to move to the second item on the agenda, which is the Finance Peer Challenge findings. We have already, I think, had this presented at Cabinet and at full council, but this gives members of the committee an opportunity to ask questions. There were 7 recommendations in the report, which we'll come to in a minute. And I think it's really important that this committee now monitor how the council takes those 7 recommendations forward and how we monitor the work that the council's doing around that. So that's why I thought it was really important that this report came to the committee this evening. I'm now going to hand over to James Newman, Assistant Director Finance, to take us through the report. Thank you. I think you might need your mic.
I've got basically a quick couple of overview slides that I just wanted to put in just to explain to the committee kind of what the process was and just a bit about kind of how it kind of works. And then there's the slide deck that was in the pack that in the agenda pack that we can then goes on to, and that, as you say, Councillor Homan covers off the recommendations at the end. So if we go through, so this is just really to make the point that really the Finance Peer Challenge is part of the LGA's sector support, and it's something that really should happen. Really, I think the LGA kind of expects really that every local authority to have either a full corporate peer challenge or a finance peer challenge every 5 years. And it basically addresses the criteria for an independent financial resilience assessment as set out in the Financial Management Code. So it's not absolutely statutory, but it's kind of something that is very much encouraged, and it does help with that kind of kind of independent kind of sort of check and challenge and sort of review of how we work. The peer challenge really is about so what it looks at is the need to balance, is how we balance our books on an annual basis, setting fully funded annual budgets and spending affordably, achieving financial sustainability through an appropriate financial strategy and acting prudently, and the need to maintain financial resilience, which, as we know, with funding reform, etc., is ever more important in local government. I'll move on to the if you keep going through, David, please, to the next one after that. But just in terms of the framework and what the actual, how the LGA, the peer team actually sort of reviewed us, well, they reviewed us against those 5 things. So financial leadership, do we have plans for long-term financial sustainability that's owned by officers and members? Financial strategy planning and forecasting, do we understand our short and long-term financial prospects? Decision making, how we take our key decisions and thinking about the financial implications, risks and options. Financial outcomes, how the financial results are monitored and acted upon, and partnership and innovation, how we actually work with partners and how we look for innovative approaches. What the LGA also offers is the opportunity for us to get asked to them to look at other things for us. And there were 2 things on the next slide. Transformation and commissioning. So we wanted really to sort of say to them to look at how we do transformation within the organisation, but also commissioning, because we've got a kind of a mixed economy within the organisation in terms of kind of in-sourced and outsourced functions. And then really I wanted to just kind of impress upon the committee the process really. So on the final day, the peer review team delivered a verbal feedback to a selected audience at the council, which was followed by the report, which you've got. The council, we've received that. We've kind of worked with the LGA just to kind of finalise it, just to make some tweaks, etc. We then have to publish that report on our website within 3 months. There's the action plan that we'll come on to in a minute in terms of the recommendations, which we also need to publish. And then within 12 months, the team come back to do a progress review of kind of how we are and how we've progressed against those recommendations. So I just wanted to kind of make it clear that that's the process, because that's not entirely covered off in the deck that they've provided. So obviously the peer review was the 22nd to the 25th of April, which is a really, really long time ago now. A week is a long time in local government. And really, as I said, so those initial slides just cover off kind of what I've already covered. If you go down, work through, and to the next one. So this just talks about kind of the process, and this makes kind of shows how expansive it was in terms of the meetings that the peer review team did across those 3 days, and the people that the peer review team spoke to. So it spoke to obviously officers, members from both sides. It spoke to partners such as Veolia, and kind of how we work with them. So it was quite a broad kind of and quite intensive process. I personally don't know where these people find the time on top of the day job as well, but there you go. But it was quite kind of a rigorous process, if you like, in terms of really kind of trying to get underneath the kind of the skin of the organisation. Clearly, we also provided, as part of the process, budget reports, statement of accounts, and we're fortunate enough to be up to date with our statement of accounts, which not all boroughs are. So they've got kind of a wealth of documentation that they would work through, and then really it's about coming in and kind of really saying, sort of checking out our self-awareness. Do we know ourselves? Do we know our strengths? Do we know our weaknesses? I think that was really what they're really trying to test. Keep going, please. So this just gives you the peer challenge team and the mix of who was actually involved. So we had a councillor from both Red and Blue. So Councillor Nazia Raymond from Wigan Council, and also Jason Cummings who's Conservative from London Borough of Croydon. And obviously, certain people on the team were kind of coming from boroughs with kind of greater financial challenges, and that was I think that's quite a helpful lens to look at kind of how we operate through. Croydon being one example. And then on the officer side, Paul Thorogood, Chief Executive at London Borough of Bexley, but their former Section 151 officer. Leanne McKnight, Director of Finance Improvement at Liverpool City Council. Daniel Omasor, the Deputy Section 151 officer at London Borough of Camden. Kevin Kew, the LGA rep, and kind of the person who kind of arranged and sort of coordinated the process, and a graduate from the LGA as well. So just in terms of overall messages, I think it's fair to say that a lot of kind of there was a lot of time invested in actually preparing for this process in the months previous, and I have to say that I think we were all really quite pleased with the outcome and the observations, which were generally positive. The peer review team concluded that the council has a highly visible and effective political and officer leadership. The council is ambitious and financially well run. We have a financial track record that has enabled investment in clear political priorities, a strong focus on VFM and ruthless financial efficiency, led and supported by a very, very capable set of members and officers. That we are self-aware, which I thought was really important, that we know ourselves, and that's the really important bit, that we don't try and kind of, we know where we are, we know where we want to be, we know our challenges, we recognise our future financial challenge, and we understand that will require a different response, and we're planning for that. We've got a strong track record in commissioning and contract managing external services. One of the points which we'll come on to in the recommendations is really around those differing perceptions of transformation within the organisation, and that is certainly something that we were aware of, and we kind of pointed the peer review team to that, and that's something that we're working on through various means. The council's leadership and effective working with public and private sector partners. So I think that people like Viola were able to say quite positive things about us as a partner, which again, I think I'll take quite, I think that's a really positive kind of thing, that we actually kind of, we were keen that stakeholders played a part, but they were also able to say quite positive things about us without any real prompting, which I thought was really positive. So we're getting that kind of independent validation from external partners. Just moving on to the recommendations. So 7 recommendations in all. The transformation ones, firstly, around that we need to articulate our overall approach, including scope and scale, and the role and the configuration of how the corporate centre works with departments. We need to identify the capacity and capability to actually support that transformation agenda as well. So transformation will take investment. We won't be able to do it entirely within a day job. Extend our medium-term financial strategy scenario, I think, to a 4th year, and really kind of roll in there kind of a range of kind of the best, medium, worst case scenarios, which we're kind of already more or less done. Progress work to appoint an independent member to the audit committee, which is kind of sit for best practice, and we know about that. Enhance the council scrutiny and audit functions with regular training and support to members. Again, something else we're working on. Consider the shared services arrangements for assurance, treasury and pension functions. So this was about the fact that they are kind of legacy tri-borough functions. And I have to say, I think they're ones that work well. And actually, I think the audit one is particularly good in the sense that we have an audit function that can look across 3 or 4 different organisations and actually use the intelligence that they gain from, say, Westminster, to actually look at kind of things that happen in Hammersmith and Fulham and vice versa. So I think that's something that works well. And I think we also have in Phil Triggs an excellent director of pensions in terms of the pension fund, and the pension fund's performance speaks for itself. And I think that's another kind of effective part of what we do. But that was really just about the kind of, I suppose, soft client managing, if you like. So just kind of how we client those functions, and perhaps have regular kind of review points. And then finally, I think the peer review team were very, very impressed with the upstream London and industrial strategy work that the leader has been progressing and really fanfaring. And they were keen that we kind of, socialise that more widely with other local authorities. So I'll pause there. That's the end of the presentation, and welcome any questions or observations.
Great, thank you. Does any of the committee want to ask any questions? Shall I? Councillor Reid, do you want to come in now?
Thank you very much. Yeah, just a couple of points. I think James covered the process and the content of the review very well, so I'm not going to cover all the ground there. I just wanted to say how important I think these reviews are. There is no one has a monopoly on good ideas. We're really trying to get to hear about best practice from all over the country, from all over local government. And that's why having an opportunity to hear from some very well qualified people who we did as part of this review is always particularly useful. As James said, we've asked them for feedback in specific areas because we know that there's work that we want to do in these areas, and we want to make sure that that is as successful as possible. I also think this is really important because at a time when every time you read the news about local government finances, it's always incredibly negative. It's particularly helpful that this can help to reassure residents of Hammersmith and Fulham that their council tax, their services are being well managed, everything's being well run, and that they have the confidence of other people within the sector. They don't need to worry about what's going to happen to the services they rely on, and they don't need to worry about the council tax being wasted. And finally, I'd just like to thank again everybody who was involved in the review process. Matt and James worked incredibly hard to make sure that the review team were able to see everything that they needed to see. I know there are a number of members of this committee who were interviewed as part of the process, councillors from both Labour and the Conservative sides of the council side. I do want to thank everybody involved and our social partners, as James said, whether that's local schools, whether it's contractors, everybody who's been involved in this process. It's an incredibly thorough piece of work, and I think it's given us a really great bit grounding for reassuring residents that their finances are on a safe footing going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any members of the committee want to come in at this stage? Councillor Vaughan.
Thank you very much, Chair. Sorry, I mean, just to say, of course, well done to all of those concerned. I was one of the people who's interviewed on the sort of scrutiny side as part of this, but clearly it's a big piece of work. Putting ourselves forward to be reviewed by the LGA is obviously, there's a selection of people who are experts in their field from both the member and officer side. So clearly they're going to run the rule over exactly what, they've got an enormous wealth of experience. So to get this very positive feedback, obviously with a few recommendations, is really, really well done. I'm interested, I guess, in terms of how this sort of action plan will be put together for 12 months' time. I think in some cases it's a question of employing a new independent person on the audit committee side. So that's a relatively, well, I don't know how straightforward it will be, but there's an obvious sort of deliverable there. But I'd be interested in terms of how the development of the action plan will take place, and interested in a bit more discussion about your thoughts on how this sort of transformation agenda will be tackled as part of that, because that's clearly something you've sort of pointed towards, and I'm assuming there's some work going on. And how will, so that's one point. So I'd be interested in how the action plan will be put together. What is where's sort of transformation as part of that? And how will some of this feed into the sort of finance processes for the next year? Because clearly we're looking to learn, and obviously there's a never-ending finance process, particularly in terms of sort of budgeting. And how will the sort of results of this review be incorporated in the next 12 months or so?
Who wants to have a go at that one?
So the action plan is obviously in the pack, so you can see kind of what we're looking to do and how we're going to sort of start to kind of make inroads into that. I think we're thinking transformation is one way we're doing that is actually looking at kind of how we kind of incorporate it into our structures. So to actually think about perhaps strengthening that transformation, that strand within the structures that we've currently got. It probably will take some investment as well, and that's another kind of aspect of it. So I think it really is about creating a capacity within the within the functions that we already have, that's over and above and in addition to the kind of the doing the day job, and that like I say, that's something that will need some funding. There are kind of ways of doing that we are looking at, and that's really, I would say, the kind of the major thing. It's about kind of creating a capacity, finding the resource to sort of to lead on that, and to actually and put in place a plan to kind of think about how we're actually going to kind of review the organisation's processes and procedures, and what might be the best way of transforming, and perhaps thinking about channel shift within the services that we provide to our residents, things like AI and those kind of things. So there's kind of a number of different ways of doing that, but that's really because a lot of it is going to be technology driven. So it is about kind of creating that capacity and resource, and actually ensuring that can then review our services, etc.
I was just going to say, Councillor Vaughan, and I'll bring Councillor Ree in. If you look at our forward plan, we've actually got the transformation programme overview on there for a future meeting. So hopefully by the time we get to that report, there'll be something firmer, and certainly in terms of how this committee can monitor how we're going to be looking at transformation and making sure that we are still providing good services. We're doing it ruthlessly, financially efficiently, but we're all actually delivering the right services for our residents as well, which this committee will have a really good, really important role to play in over the next few months. Councillor Reid, do you want to come in on that as well?
Yes, thank you very much. So, as you say, the committee will be well aware of the 4 transformation programmes that we've got going on in the council at the moment. Firstly, looking at staffing, secondly at property, thirdly on revenue, and fourthly on technology and data. So these are things that we've been working on now for the last couple of years. I think the recommendations are right, that these should become perhaps more formalised programmes, proper terms of references, proper project boards that are meeting regularly, and so we can monitor progress more accurately when it comes to delivery of these programmes. Councillor Vaughan, you're absolutely right to say that we should look at how this contributes to the annual budget setting process. At the moment, the way that we go through it is obviously it's an ongoing process. You finish one budget in February, then you automatically start on the next one. We're looking for here longer term savings. So things that we can start doing now that perhaps they won't make a saving next year, but in 2 or 3 years' time, all of a sudden that will save a big chunk of cash in the annual budget, which will help us meet our financial needs as we're going forward through the years. I'm sure we'll be back many times to talk about progress in terms of these transformation boards. James says rightly that some of these might need additional resource in the short term, but that will be dwarfed by the savings that they will make in the longer term. And so this is money worth spending, and a ruthlessly financially efficient way to operate.
And of course, we have already looked at staffing through people and talent a couple of times, and we've already looked at digital inclusion and AI, things which are still within the sight of this committee. So there will be things that come back, probably part of the sort of more pulled together transformation programs. But yeah.
Just to add, we've also been speaking to other boroughs about their transformation journeys, boroughs that are perhaps further along, just to kind of understand the learning and the kind of, what's gone well, what hasn't gone well, and the learning as well. Just because, so we are kind of outward looking, if you like, in terms of just trying to sort of learn from what already exists rather than just reinventing the wheel. Just in terms of the rest of your question, Councillor Vaughan, I mean, I think that the transformation one is perhaps is really the thorny one there. That is kind of the sort of the trickiest sort of aspect of the recommendations that have been provided. I think that obviously the principle of having an independent member on the audit committee is a good one. I think that's quite effective and it's quite helpful, kind of just having that neutrality on an audit committee. But it can be tricky to find someone, and I think that is the hard bit. But there are kind of sort of agencies that actually specialise in this kind of thing, so it is something that we could do. And then in terms of the shared services, that's the shared services arrangements. That's really about having kind of annual reviews in place to sort of look at the effectiveness of those functions and those arrangements. What's gone well, what could go better. But like I say, I feel that those are good legacy tri-borough functions that kind of work quite well for us at the moment anyway. And then the upstream one is obviously one that can be done quite simply. So I think it's a transformation one where I think we're going to need to kind of focus with most consideration, I would say.
Thanks very much. Sorry, so the further comment stroke question, I suppose, is on the scrutiny training aspect. Certainly we discussed this in the meeting that I went to without going into exactly everything we discussed there. Clearly, this was a finance review. I think we discussed scrutiny more generally, to be honest. But I wonder if there is give some consideration effectively, given that this is about finance scrutiny. Obviously, all of the packs do a certain amount of that in all of their reports, but in particular, obviously, in scrutinising the budget in January. So I wonder if some thought could be given to giving at least some general training to scrutiny, so members of PACS, in the autumn ahead of the sort of budget scrutiny that we'll be going through in January, which I think is, if it wasn't, ought to have been the subject of the sort of scrutiny recommendation in this report, because it was more about finance rather than the sort of generality of the council. And that would, I guess, be at least one step forward in terms of, looking at this training for scrutiny functions.
Yeah, so and we can certainly look at that. So I've been trying to arrange some training through SIPFA for the audit committee, so they've got a better governance forum, and we can sort of you could probably utilise that or something similar for what you're talking about there, Councillor Vaughan, as well. So that's certainly something we can definitely look at and get that arranged, because I think I think that would be quite a good step forward.
I think the LGA have got quite good resources on this sort of thing as well, so it might be worth sending some of those around.
Councillor Antonadis.
I don't think this is working very well. Can you hear me? Yeah, it's fine. That you've looked at other boroughs, and maybe they're all in sort different stages of different parts. So, what's the sort of takeaways that you've got from which borough? How many have you looked at, first of all, and what are the big takeaways from some of them, and some things that don't work and some things that do work? Because you have to have a certain period of time to actually analyze what has become efficient and what hasn't. So, is there anything you can add to that? I know it's a bit of a big question.
Yeah, we've spoken to three. We did a sort of initial workshop with 3 boroughs. Ealing and Greenwich were 2, I remember, and it was really just about how they set up their transformation, how they did transformation within their own organisation, how they set up the teams. There was a kind of a bit of a debate around the kind of the central devolved kind of model, just kind of how that works at each. And I think there's something about the kind of the culture of each organisation that you need to overlay onto that a little bit. We at Hammersmith and Fulham, I think our centre is probably a little bit lighter than some, for example. So, but I think there's also the really important thing is having the capacity there to deliver. So to acknowledge from the outset that you can't. It's going to take more than just people doing it. You can't just add it onto people's roles. It's really important to have the right capacity to actually deliver it. So I think that's probably one of the key takeaways, that we know we will need to kind of have a good level of investment in this.
Do you mean external consultation in to help with that, facilitate that process?
Or
train us.
I think it's more probably probably more kind of internal people rather than kind of a consultancy firm coming in to do it, if that makes sense. I think there's kind of some cynicism around that, and I think it's about probably owning it. But this is also can be quite a specialist area as well. So it is. I think it's probably about striking the right balance, and getting. But you want to kind of get that internal learning as well from it, and I think that's really important.
Okay. What made you choose those boroughs?
I think our digital guys were just sort of reached out to people that they knew were kind of on
starting to work on it.
Yeah. So finance directors have the Society of London Treasurers, which is SLT. They're sort of like the London-wide, but sort of all 33 boroughs. All the finance directors meet regularly to discuss finance stuff. And there's Lottie, which is the IT equivalent. So that's the group of London chief digital officers that meet regularly. And it was kind of sort of sourced and arranged through that.
I think, Matt, you wanted to come in on that?
Yeah, I was just going to, James has helpfully outlined that specific engagement, and Councillor Rees referred to the 4 current cross-council transformation programmes. But the council's got a long-standing kind of record around transformation on top of that. So there's been things like REAP, which is Resident Experience and Access Programme. We've recently had, and it's closing at the moment, a housing improvement programme. Those 2 areas are particularly looking at channel shift, making services more online for residents and so on. Anyway, I'm mentioning those because as part of those programs, I know they also engaged other councils looking at their work, what they've done, what systems, and so on. So it's very common for officers for services to be engaging others to see if we can learn anything and apply it locally.
Can I ask a question? It's about our sort of partners, as you said, and you mentioned Viola. Obviously, a large amount of the council money is spent on commissioning services and our contractors for providing particular services. Could you maybe just say a little bit more about what they looked at in relation to that? Because sort of tight contract management has obviously got to be financially beneficial to the council, and it's sometimes, I think, where we do find weaknesses in our services. So I'd just be interested to know. I don't think there's anything in the report that particularly refers to that, but I think it is an area of interest to all councillors.
So we officers on the LBHF side weren't part of the conversation. So we weren't in the room when the peer review team did the interviews. We did do exit interviews with the sort of anyone who sort of did the thing. So we're pretty well. It's a pretty well-oiled machine in Hammersmith and Fulham in terms of the process for external inspections. So we were sort of able. We did do that, and I think it was just generally about the relationship that we had with the contractor, with the stake, with every other partner, how we worked with them. I think it was along those lines really, and just the kind of, I suppose, the contract management and those kind of things, but we weren't party to the specifics.
And what documents were they provided with in advance in relation to sort of commissioning and contracts?
So I can't remember off the top of my head, to be honest with you. They were provided. It was primarily financial documentation. So obviously the statement of accounts. There were budget monitoring reports. We would have, I'd have to go back and check, but it was a lot of sort of financial literature that was provided in advance.
Okay, thank you. Matt, did you want to come in on that?
They were given, for example, the council's sourcing strategy, which is the long-term sourcing strategy. So that went to the LGA as part of this, but not to the partners, but for the LGA to reference.
Thank you. Anybody else got any questions? Councillor Fonzo.
Thank you very much, Chair. Councillor Vaughan has already stolen my thunder on two of the questions I was planning to ask, so I will ask a follow-up with regards to the tailored training programme regarding audit. So in Annex 3, it says the target for that is December 26. But the comments you made earlier indicate that might be sooner. Is it likely to be sooner, as in?
So, I mean, training has been going on, I think, for members of the audit committee for well over a year already. I mean, it's a rolling training program. Depending on various issues that are coming up in future meetings, there'll be different types of training focusing on different areas. But I understand from members of the committee that they're getting an awful lot out of it, and it's been proving useful so far.
As a member of the audit committee, I can say we are having and have had training. I could also comment about the independent person to be appointed to the audit committee, and that has actually been in train for quite a while as well, but it wasn't delivered by the time that the peer review took place. I'm not sure we've got anybody appointed now, but it's certainly been on the agenda of the audit committee for quite a while. The other comment I would make, having been on the audit committee, is about the shared services, certainly corporate anti-fraud, pensions, and corporate anti-fraud was the one I particularly wanted to pick up on, because I think across the boroughs it does a really good job, and it's quite interesting to compare some of the fraud work that goes on across the different boroughs. So whilst we're talking about, there's an awful lot of this for the audit committee as well, and I haven't got the next agenda for the next audit committee, but I'm sure that some of this is going to be looked at there as well. So we're not the only place scrutinising some of this, if that makes sense. Hope that's helpful. Did you have any other questions, Dave? Okay. Anybody else got any other questions? Councillor Reid, do you want to say anything to sort of wind up as such, or?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. So I think this is obviously the review is for life, not just for Christmas. You know, we've had this report. We're going to be looking at implementing the recommendations. But as James said, they'll be coming back to check on progress and how things are going. We will always be looking at how we provide services and how we manage residents' money. We will always be looking to try and find the most efficient ways in order to do that. And so this is, I would say, a step in the journey, but it's not the start or the end of that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think the sort of big takeaway for the committee is, A, we will monitor how this is going, but also we will have the transformation reports come here to look at as well. And I just want to pick up on the point that a couple of people have made about the training. So I think the one recommendation was that we perhaps widen out that training before this year's budget round for all members. So it's not just audit committee, but we can have a look at that. And I will certainly be kind of looking at whether it becomes a formal report or whether it's just something that I look at over the next few months on the training programme, because we all get inducted as new councillors. We have an election next year. So I think maybe having some strengthened scrutiny training as part of that induction programme, which has hitherto happened, but probably not being as powerful as it might have been in the past. That'd be certainly one of the recommendations that I'll be making. And I welcome suggestions to the committee on anything else that you think ought to go into that induction training programme. So on that note, is the report noted? Yes. Okay, thank you very much. Now my computer has switched itself off and I can't see the last bit on the thing. Yeah. Yes, so, right. So it's the draft work programme. So you will note that in September we do have the transformation programme overview, which I think will give us a bit more meat on the bone, not necessarily the details of transformations taking place, but a little bit more about the strategy we're going to use. We have got corporate performance indicators, which have not been to this committee for a while. We've got an update on co-production, which is another cross-cutting issue that we've looked at, and we haven't monitored how that's going recently. And we haven't looked at the PAC programme recently so that we can see how that fits in with the overall scrutiny of the council. So it's quite a lot. And as you can see, we've got some other things that we've already mentioned this evening on for future meetings after that. So happy to answer any questions about that, or could I just ask everybody to note the programme? We've got quite a lot on for September, so we might have 3 of the 4 rather than 4, but we'll see how it goes. Noted. Okay. Has everybody noted the date of the next meeting, which is the 17th of September? Looking forward to it already. Thank you very much, everybody, for your contributions.